What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the Draft Report. In today's video, we'll be talking about potential first-round draft pick and Florida State receiver Keon Coleman. So let's dive into the film. Coleman stands 6'4", 215, and is an absolute freak at the catch point. Got a couple examples to show you. This one, first game of the season against LSU, defender draped all over him, ball's up, he high points it very well, but as he's coming down, defender gets his hand right in his arms, but Coleman's able to use his strength and still rip it away from the defender. Here's another example from that same game. Coleman's just running a streak up the field. Defender tries to give him a little punch. He just runs straight through that contact, has a step on the defender, and tracks this ball beautifully over that back shoulder. This looks easy, but he's on the hashes right now, and this ball's thrown way towards the numbers. He has to track this over his shoulder and go and get it through the contact. While he did have a step on this defender, there's still a lot of contact there, and he drags it in super easily. This play against Clemson to win the game in overtime is another great example of his contested catching. Defender draped all over him. He does a great job turning his head to the ball. Defender doesn't look, and then he goes up with one arm and is able to drag this into his body. This defender is holding him, and he's locking his other arm down, and he's able to just go up and stab it with one arm, bring it in, touchdown, wins the game. This play here against Miami shows his strength. Here, he's at the catch, and this defender is draped all over him, holding him, pulling him to the ground. He's able to focus, track this ball in, gets in his hands, and you see this defender's arm is still in there, but he has so much strength in those hands, he's able to just rip it away through the contact. As you see, pass interference comes in, doesn't matter. Coleman's so elite at the catch point. He just has a rare blend of skills and strength at this catch point to be a quarterback's best friend and a guy that you can trust in every situation. This play is just a little screen pass, but it's an amazing catch. The ball's a little behind him, just reaches out with one hand, able to bring it in. And this little catch just shows, again, how elite Coleman's hands are and how he can be trusted in every situation. As a contested catcher, Coleman is as good as it gets, but when he tries to separate over the middle of the field, he's just not very consistent at it. So here's a play against Nate Wiggins, one of the best corners in this draft, and he just doesn't do much to set up this route. No separation here. As we see, decent release, but doesn't really gain a step on that. But right here, he does have that inside, leverage on Wiggins. I'd like to see him, give a false step outside and then really break this in, but it's just a lazy, oh, ho-hum, I'm going to run up the field and then round this route. There's no sharpness in this break. He really beats him well on this release. If he sells this route towards the outside and then gets upfield, he could really get open on this, but he just doesn't do much like that, and he's very limited as a route runner. This play ends up being a very good play for Coleman, but on this slant here, he just doesn't really do much to sell it. You can see it's a pretty rounded route, and he doesn't sell this upfield or sell this to the outside. It's just a kind of rounded slant. But on the catch, he does a great job breaking a tackle, juking, and then taking it to the house. For a guy who's 6'4", 215, he's very good with the ball in his hands, and he actually returned punts for Florida State, which is rare for a guy of his size. But again, you can just see the lack of explosion in his routes. You can see the lack of nuance of the route tree, and he just doesn't really do much to separate over the middle of the field, but he is pretty good with the ball in his hands. As I mentioned earlier, Coleman has very good release packages. As you can see him on the top left on the screen, this ends up being a run play, but he breaks someone's ankles on the release, which is very rare. And I think his ability he shows with his footwork off the line gives you some confidence that he might be able to develop into a decent route runner, but he just is not there right now, even though his releases are spectacular. This play is another example of his poor route running. He's lined up in the slot, and he's running an outbreaker, but in this 10 yards area, 5-yard area, he doesn't do really anything to sell this towards the middle of the field or sell this like he's going to break. I mean, right here, he kind of plants like he's going to go inside, but this corner's not biting on it. It's not enough, and he takes about 4 extra steps here. This should be, if you're planning here, he should already be facing outside. He takes, his false step, 2 steps, 3 steps, 4 steps, 5 steps to get all the way turned around. And he just doesn't have the elite foot quickness to be able to separate like this, and I think it's really going to hurt him in the NFL. You see just nothing really to sell this route upfield, no nuance, no route salesmanship, and very slow feet on the break. One area where Coleman excels is as a run blocker. You see him here on the right. This is going to be a little screen pass to the outside, and Coleman, with a two-hand punch, just completely annihilates this block and allows his running back to get in the end zone. He completely clears this cornerback out of the way. Watch this again. Just a dominant two-hand punch, pushes him about 5 yards back, and he does this consistently on tape. He's a very willing and reliable run blocker that any team will want. So that's going to wrap up the film portion of today's breakdown. I just want to give my final thoughts and a grade for Coleman. Um, he has great size, but maybe a tick below elite athleticism, probably closer to average as an athlete. His long speed's probably going to be in the 4.5 range at the combine, which isn't bad for a 6'4" guy, but just not that elite level that's going to threaten defenses over the top. And then his quickness off the line isn't anything spectacular. Out of breaks, he's just not that explosive. So he just doesn't really have the athletic tools to be an elite separator. I do think with a little technique and a little refinement, he can be a guy that has the ability to get open, where he really doesn't right now. He rarely is setting up his routes or selling them, but he doesn't really need to, because in college he was mostly just running streaks and they were just throwing it up to him. His highlights were amazing, even though he only caught, I think, 10 of 30 contested catches, which is amazing still, but it's just not a very efficient offense, even if you're as good as he is at it. You're more efficient when you're getting open over the middle of the field, and this showed in his numbers. 50 catches, 650 yards, 11 touchdowns. Not bad numbers, but compared to Odunze and Neighbors and Harrison, it's just not that level, and he's being put in those conversations in this draft. So I think if you're drafting him to be a consistent, 1,500-yard guy, he's not going to be that. He might get to 1,000 yards a couple seasons. He'll be a double-digit touchdown guy. But I kind of put him more in like the Cortland Sutton range than a true elite guy like Devontae Adams or something. He like Cortland Sutton, they're going to make some elite contested catches. They're great in the red zone, but they just don't have the ability to get open over the middle of the field to be a consistent number one option for a team. And I think they're best suited as a complementary piece to an elite guy like a Jamar Chase or something. Kind of like a T. Higgins role. I don't think he's as good as T. Higgins, because T. Higgins can get open, but that kind of role where there's a main guy to get open and then he can be a red zone threat and make some amazing catches. But I have him as a 6.37 on my 8-point scale, making him a second-round pick. And I think he's a little overrated. I think as people watch the film and dive into his numbers later in the season, which are really disappointing, they'll start to see that he is not this elite receiver prospect and kind of a one-trick pony when it comes to just being a contested catcher. But that one thing he does, he is very good at, and he's truly one of the best contested catchers I've seen. And again, as a run blocker, he's pretty good. So I think he has some very good traits, but he's just not an explosive athlete, and he's pretty much reliant on making catches through contact. So that's going to wrap up the video. I hope you guys enjoy, and I'll see you guys next time.